and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric here at Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1985 comedy National Lampoon's European Vacation. Now this comedy runs for 94 minutes long. It is directed by Amy Heckerling, with a script written by John Hughes and Robert Klein, and the story was written by John Hughes. The score was done by Charles Fox, the cinematography by Robert Painter, and the editing by Pembroke Herring. And it stars Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Jason Lively, the late Dana Hill, plus cameo appearances from John Astin, Robbie Coltrane, Maureen Lipman, Moon Unit Zappa, and the always funny Eric Idle. In 1983, National Lampoon's Vacation was a commercial success. The slapstick comical elements marked a positive outlook on the Griswolds as they became America's most beloved dysfunctional family. So instead of resting on their laurels for at least 3 or 4 years for a possible sequence, distributor Warner Brothers decided to just bring them back to the screen 2 years too early with National Lampoon's European Vacation. I think if they would have just, waited for maybe a couple more years, then they should have had the sequel. But, since they were milking upon the commercial success that the National Lampoon's Vacation had, because it scored very big in the box office, they didn't want to waste time and wanted to go right ahead with another sequel. Bad move. The story of the movie goes something like this. The Griswold family won a trip to Europe from playing a silly game show called Pig in the Poke, hosted by Gomez Addams, played by, John Astin, the guy who played Gomez Addams from the original Addams Family. So the Griswolds win a trip to Europe as they embark on several misadventures as they explore the vast landscapes and the cultural settings of their European voyage. The 4 countries they go to are England, France, Germany, and Italy. Sure, like the other Vacation series, the plot is very thin, but the story itself was very inferior to its predecessor, and the laughs were quite blatantly pedestrian. And aside from that, the characters just felt jilted as they went from the typical unlucky family to just plain old American idiots that give the wrong impressions that Americans are too ignorant for European culture. It didn't really help that all the performers returned to the sequel, as Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo return as Clark and Ellen Griswold. However, when Anthony Michael Hall was asked to reprise his Rusty Griswold character, he rebuffed and chose to do another 1980s cult classic titled Weird Science. And they didn't really bother asking Dana Barron if she wants to reprise the Audrey Griswold character. So they hired new performers to play Rusty and Audrey. And I had some mixed emotions towards the new recasting of Rusty and Audrey. For one thing, Jason Lively was not very good in his role as Rusty, as he comes across as a goofy, awkward, and over-the-top with his perverted ways, which comes off more as being stupid rather than comical. Dana Hill fares a little bit better, and she actually is the better replacement as Audrey than Dana Barron. Dana Barron's Audrey really didn't have much to do, but at least we had a little more character depth in this Audrey, even if it comes to the point where she just repetitively laments over abandoning her new boyfriend, Jack, played by William Zabka, who you may have remembered as the leading antagonist in the first Karate Kid movie. Chase goes a bit beyond the role of Clark. I thought his character kind of changed from a somewhat easily disgruntled father, as in this movie, European Vacation, Clark seems to come across as a complete moron who just can't seem to do anything right and seems to cause destruction towards everything he touches, and everyone around him feels his wrath. Whenever he's around, trouble is usually not lurking far behind. Beverly D'Angelo, meanwhile, stays persistent and didn't change that much in the movie as the level-headed matriarch, trying to keep Sparky and the kids from insanity. But even her character too kind of changes a bit. In the first movie, she's kind of, she didn't really always have that much dimension. She kind of came across as a one-dimensional, stereotypical matriarchal character that anybody could have played. She kind of, her role is not really that much different than Julie Kavner's role as Marge Simpson on The Simpsons. Anybody can play that kind of level-headed matriarch. In this movie, she seems to come across as being flirty, and I think she actually truly embodied the definition of the word MILF. And she really was quite steamy in that bathroom scene where Clark was filming her. And of course he never erased it. And then when they came into Italy, her steamy bathroom scene was made into a successful porn movie. Now, I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the content of this movie, which I also found to be a little bit turned off and somewhat disturbed. Okay. Eric Idle. Of course, as you all know, one of the cool things about this movie was that there were a lot of great familiar faces, and like as I mentioned, John Astin is in this movie as the host of a TV game show called Pig in the Poke. He's kind of playing sort of off a Richard Dawson Family Feud character as a host who kisses the female contestants. And I guess by the result of a default, the Griswolds actually outbeat the rival family, who seem to come across as a bunch of scholarly intellectuals. Let's see, there was also Robbie Coltrane, who you may remember as Hagrid from Harry Potter. He has a cameo appearance in the London hotel where Ellen was taking a bath and she was studying all these flirty, seductive stuff to Clark. Well, she thinks she's talking to Clark, but she doesn't realize that there's another stranger in the bathroom listening in on her. His role was quite effective. But there is one character cameo appearance that I felt very, very, very sorry, and I don't know why he was in this movie. I'm talking about Eric Idle. Eric Idle, as talented as he is for comedy, has one of the most thankless roles for a cameo performance. He is playing the role as an English bicyclist that the Griswolds just keep running over, and it's never fully explained how he always seems to run into them, whether it be in England, France, Italy. The irony itself is quite disturbing, and what I mean by disturbing is this guy a stalker? Because it seems like every time they go country hopping, he always seems to somewhat crash into them. And the most disturbing part is while it looks like his arms are hemorrhaging and blood is gushing out of him, he just takes it in a very passive demeanor, which I also find to be somewhat disturbed by that. But what hurt this, but that's not the worst thing that made this film so bad. What hurt this film badly was that comedy director, the late Harold Ramis, was too busy starring in Ghostbusters that he just wasn't reached to direct. So instead, Amy Heckerling, who is still living on the coattails of the cult 1982 classic Fast Times at Ridgemont High, took over the director's chair. Heckerling's flair of comedy seems more concrete, which sadly takes over from the craziness that from the other Vacation films. The fantasy sequences in the film actually work pretty good. However, I too felt it was inspired by bodies of work Heckerling has done before or some other projects she had in mind. In other words, what I felt about this movie was it could have been just a bunch of special direct-for-video half-hour snippets of the Griswolds' misadventures. I mean, what they could have did was they could have did a half-hour TV special of the Griswolds visiting England. And then the next week we could have the Griswolds visiting France. And then the following week the Griswolds visiting Germany. And then finally the Griswolds visiting Italy. I mean, it could have been just 5 small TV miniseries instead of just, taking 4 of their European destinations and rolling it into one 94-minute awkwardly proposed film. But it could have been just a bunch of mini comedy series, direct for video. And that's the impression I got. Now, I'm not playing the blame game entirely on Miss Heckerling, as John Hughes returns to the scene as the scriptwriter. However, I think there must have been some dispute that erupted, because it kind of felt like in the middle of the movie, or maybe at the early stages of the movie, Mr. Hughes must have walked out at some point, because there was a lot of surreal slapstick moments that did not feel like a John Hughes movie, or the John Hughes films that we're all familiar with. The first Vacation film was funny because the situations faced by the Griswolds are something that we could get the gist of. The humor delivered here comes off cliched and somewhat borderline tasteless. The silliness in this movie is quite cringing, and the overtones can at times feel a bit racist. That the humor can be very disturbing at times. I mean, are British people always this nice and genteel all the time? Are the French always dismissive and rude? Are Germans always aggressive and stiff? I mean, the scenes that really made me laugh are scenes that had similarities to the ones from Vacation, like when the Griswolds interact amongst themselves, as the comedy comes across nicely in that area. But when they're interacting with foreign policies, it's actually very poorly executed. The ending of the film was too rushed and also quite uninteresting that you would miss it even if it came out to bite you. Aside from that, I thought the movie deserved an R rating rather than a PG-13. There's way too much swearing, lots of sexual innuendo, and a myriad of hedonistic scenes that go way beyond a PG-13 film. Several of the swearing was dubbed to avoid it from being an R-rated movie, just in case they're inviting your young kiddies to see this film. Better yet, avoid the kids from seeing this film and rent Christmas Vacation instead. Sure that in Christmas Vacation there is some foul language, but it's very minimal and is used for more comic effect. I was a bit appalled that the family's last name was spelled with an A instead of an O in the name Griswold. So instead of I mean, the rest of the other movies, it's spelled W-O-L-D. It wasn't actually the downfall for Miss Heckerling. She went on to direct another cult classic 1989 movie titled Look Who's Talking. The same year, Chase, D'Angelo, and Hughes collaborated to make the superior Christmas Vacation. Even though the movie wasn't the best addition to the Vacation series, it wasn't a complete failure, and if you could refrain from taking this film seriously or offensively, it actually is not a bad guilty pleasure. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I will give it a 6. Well, I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. You can write back to me if you like. Subscribe to my channel. Remember, be kind, be courteous, and I will be back with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, so long everyone, goodbye.